Want to make more money at craft shows? Well, first off, might I suggest that you read my book, but also that's what we're going to be talking about in this video today. I'm going to be chatting with my friend Nicole Stevenson all about how to increase your sales at craft shows and beyond. Nicole and I both spent about a decade each selling at craft shows, and now we have businesses teaching other artists and makers about all the things that we learned the hard way over the years. I, of course, have badass creatives, and Nicole is the founder of Dear Handmade Life, which she produces a number of craft shows throughout California called Patchwork Shows. She also runs an online membership community, and she is the founder of Craftcation Conference, which is an amazing event in Southern California, actually in Ventura, California, that I've spoken at for a number of years. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about how to increase your sales at craft shows. So let's get into it. Let's talk about increasing your sales at craft shows, because you run a whole series of craft shows called Patchwork Shows, and you spent about a decade just like me selling at craft shows, right? So we both have had lots of experience trying to make more money at craft shows.
Absolutely. There was definitely a period of time where my entire income was craft shows. So that was it. So I definitely had to make sure that I was making enough at those shows to pay my rent.
Okay, what are some of your favorite tips for how to increase those sales, increase profitability at craft shows?
One thing is to think about how your booth is set up. So making it inviting for people to come in. One of the things that I love is having like a little activity for kids or whoever's with people who the person is shopping, something to keep them engaged. Some of our vendors, I've seen them do a little coloring station. So they'll have like a little tiny table and kids chairs and, just Xerox coloring pages and some crayons. And that will keep the child engaged while the parent is shopping. And that will increase your sales. Absolutely. After that, I like to bring any of the stuff that I made that didn't work out very well, like my imperfects. I'll bring those and I'll have those at the front to kind of draw people in. And it's also a great way to get rid of stuff that that didn't work out. The other thing that I love to do is I don't do a lot of sales, but I love twofers. So whatever the thing is. So it would always be when I was selling my t-shirts, I feel like it was 28 or 2 for 49. So it was a huge discount when you went to two, and especially instead of saying like 52, I did 49. So just like doing a little bit of research into numbers and how people perceive different numbers and discounts. Like there's a reason why stores say something is $1.98 versus $1.92 or whatever it is. There's a lot of scientific research and on the psychology of numbers and pricing. So I would look into that a little bit, because the difference between, $52 and $49 may not be, that much. But when you're considering over time the percentage of people who are going to buy the $49 deal versus the $52 deal, it could make a huge difference. You also want to make sure that you accept multiple types of payment. I know we all pay with cards, but have cash and have change. Have cash, have change. Have cash, have change. And then accepting Venmo, PayPal, Apple Pay, all of that stuff is going to increase your sales. I do occasionally I will have cash and I'll ask a vendor like, I don't have any change, thinking about that. And just making sure you accept every different type of payment. Having items at your cash wrap station, like think about when you go to the grocery store. What's at the grocery store while you're checking out, while you're waiting there? Impulse buys. You've got candy, you've got magazines, you've got all this like dopamine stuff, as you're like waiting there to check out. If you have kids, those kids are throwing everything in the cart. I'm always like, you can never have too many mints. I mean, come on. And I'll throw mints in. So thinking about something like that, it might be, a little tricky depending on what you make. If you're a ceramicist, it's not like you're going to have like a big bowl there, but think about it. Maybe you can have like a little pendant, like a little ceramic pendant, or pins. I've seen, people make little pins, or just come up with something that's like an end of purchase impulse buy that people can throw on at the end.
So some of the things you said, like the twofers, so that's a big one that I used to do when I was doing art markets regularly. So one of the things I sold was earrings, and I would do they didn't cost me a lot to make, so I had a really high profit margin on them. And so I would do like a $12 per pair or 2 for 20. And I had a little sign, and those were some of my best sellers. And then one of my other best sellers was some of that impulse buy stuff. So I carried other artists and makers' work as well, in addition to my own at the time. And so one of the artists that I carried, they had some really funny greeting cards and magnets with their work. And so the magnets were like $5. The greeting cards were like $4 at the time. And a lot of times those earrings, magnets, and greeting cards would make my booth fee. And so then I got to like really like make extra money on all the other stuff. But those would sort of make sure that I always at least covered my bases by having some of those small impulse items.
That's great. I remember one of the things I made was I did t-shirts that I would screen print them, and then I would do appliques on them. And then people would be asking me, how do I want to make an applique, but on like a different thing that I have. And that was when I started making kits. So, just think about there is a way for you to have a lower priced impulse buy. I made clothes. So it's like, what am I going to do? Make a tiny t-shirt? No, so just like get creative and try to think of something that you can do that's, cost effective, low effort, that can, because like Mallory said, it can make the difference between making your booth fee, on these little things. And then the rest of the money is going to be your profit.
Yeah. Well, you said something else about, sometimes when people see something you have and respond and are like, oh, I wish you had that, but in a different version, or I wish you had this instead. Another option for some makers is to also take custom orders, right? Because I know some people will get into trouble because they will like hear people say that and think that they're really meaning to do that. And so then go buy a bunch of product or create a bunch of product. And then that specific person who said that is not necessarily around at the next show. And it might be great. It might grow your business, or it might be a total flop. But instead, actually, when somebody says that, there's the option to take a custom order then and there and like get the money from that specific person who wants the thing. And like,
absolutely. I did tons of custom orders, and I would have people pay half of it up front at the show, and then they paid the other half when they picked it up. Yeah. And that worked really well for me.
Whether it's like custom orders or making a bunch of product ahead of time, I think like inventory and pricing is another thing to consider. Do you have any tips for that? I know I have a video with my business coach, Gwen Bortner, about inventory management. So if you want to watch that, you can check that out. But I would love to know from you, Nicole, how you handled like pricing your products and inventory management.
Yeah, definitely. Before I talk about inventory management, I want to answer a question that I get asked a lot, which is how much stuff should I have at a craft fair? And I will say you should have at least 10 times what you hope to sell. So if you hope to sell $100 worth of stuff, you should have $1,000 worth of stuff. That's just kind of a general thing. And that's the minimum. I found that the more stock and variety I did clothes, so in sizes and all of that, the better I would do. Once my stock got dwindled, so did my sales. Just having those options and being able to say yes when someone asks, do you have this in a medium? Yes, you've got it. Inventory management. So I think that that's really tricky for those of you who sell at craft fairs as well as in an online store. When I was selling, it was so long ago that wasn't even a thing. It was just like I had like a piece of paper that I would write things on. But I know that Shopify, I know that a lot of things like Shopify will have things where it's coordinated, like your craft fair inventory is coordinated with your online inventory too. And that really that can help you increase your sales, because you can say, I don't have the medium here, but I know I have it. I have it at home, and I can ship that to you, free shipping or whatever, or you can give them one of your button, I'll give you this free button, and whatever the case may be, and make that sale then. So I think it just depends on like where your online shop is and what that platform is. But you can also just go, I don't know if it's old fashioned, but using a spreadsheet, and just updating it on a spreadsheet. And you can do that in Google Drive so that you can update that spreadsheet while you're at the show selling stuff. And I would say that would be the most kind of rudimentary, way to do that.
Yeah, that's kind of how I handled it. And I, like you, was doing craft shows more regularly before a lot of the tools that exist now existed. But I would bring just like a plain notebook, and that would be my inventory for the day. And I had sort of like codes that would make it like shorthand for me to write down what I was selling. I would write down like the amount, like if it was cash or card, so I could reconcile everything. And then I had a spreadsheet. So when I got back home, I would update my spreadsheet inventory.
Yeah, I think we use Stripe in our pop-up shop, and it's great because Katie, who's on my team, was actually the one who digitized all of that stuff, but she enters all the like SKUs ahead of time, so like everything is there. It just makes it so much easier than how it used to be. So yeah, so those would be my inventory management tips. And as far as pricing, which you asked about, pricing.
I know it's always the challenge, right? Even for non-maker businesses, pricing.
I know it really is hard. I think for a maker business, at least you have that data there. You know, if you're selling a service, it can be kind of trickier to find out your price, but I am a strong believer in a pricing formula. I know that there are people out there that, you know, are not into it, have other ways to do it, but for me, I'm all about the pricing formula, like looking at what are your materials costing you. Do not forget to put everything in there. So if you make t-shirts and you screen print on them and you're like, okay, that's it, I just have to figure out the screen printing. Well, what if you sew a tag on the back? And then you're like, okay, the cost of the tag. Well, what about the cost of the thread? And you're like, it's only like 2 cents. Well, guess what? That 2 cents adds up over time. So thinking about every single thing, every material, and, you know, considering the shipping you had to pay to get your t-shirts there, or if you went and picked them up. Like I lived in LA for a while, and let me say, this was a long time ago before all the American Apparel debauchery happened, but I would drive to American Apparel's warehouse downtown to like pick up my stuff because it was less in my gas and time than having it shipped. But I still had to count my gas and time in going to pick my stuff up. Thinking about just everything, like your screen printing, like over time, the squeegee that you're using or the screens, and trying to amortize those expenses, you know, which basically means dividing them up over time. So like, let's say that you have, you know, a screen that you are using to screen print your shirts. And let's say it cost you $100. And let's say that you can only use that screen 100 times. So then, you know, the cost of that screen is actually a dollar per t-shirt. So thinking about things that way, you know, and considering your tools, the ink that you use, even though you're like, it's hardly any ink, it's like a teaspoon. Well, over time, that teaspoon's going to add up. So considering all of that, and then considering your labor too. And I'll definitely will hear people who say, well, I'm just the one who's making it, so I don't have to pay for labor. Well, guess what? You absolutely have to pay for labor. And at some point, you might not be the one who's making things. Like if your business takes off, you need to be able to hire somebody else to do the thing that you're doing and pay them a living wage. So what would that be? Depending on what state you're in, you know, the minimum wage and a living wage is going to be different, but just thinking like $20 an hour. So calculating that in, okay. And then you're like, well, I make all of my stuff in a batch. Like I cut out all the shirts and then I sew all the shirts. Okay, well, add up all that time. And then you made 100 shirts. How long did it take you? And take that time to figure it out so that you truly know how much what you're making should cost. And then of course you have to double it, or some people 2.5 times it, some people even 3 times it, because you have to account for your other business expenses that aren't in there. You know, your website hosting, the electricity you're using, your business insurance. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So having a solid pricing formula so that you go to a craft fair and you sell $500 worth of stuff, you don't go home and go, oh my gosh, I only made $50. And underpricing, it just hurts everybody. It hurts all of us. So don't underprice.
I think that there's some other stuff that we can learn from retail and retail shops in terms of like how to increase our sale, right? Because at the end of the day, having a craft show booth is kind of like having a mini little pop-up store, right? And so some things like customer service and kind of inviting people into your booth, telling people about your work as a maker, because that's why they're at craft shows. They really want to connect with you. And then also like activating the senses. So if you do like bath and body or like candles, like smell, or maybe if you sell handmade like food products like cookies or something, you want them to taste or you want them to touch if it's something like clothing and tactile. Can you tell some more like tips about some of that sort of stuff?
Gosh, I went to a craft fair. I was in Atlanta I think last year, and I went to a craft fair there, and somebody just basically pulled me into their booth and was like, I have psoriasis. And she was like, oh, I've got the thing for that. And she like puts this oil all over my skin and just starts, going to town. And I felt like I kind of had to buy it. Like I didn't have a choice. It was a little too pressury for me, but yes, she made the sale. So, so great job to her. But yeah, just engaging people, finding ways to make sure that they know that they are buying something handmade or independently designed, like sharing your process somehow with them. If you're a jeweler, like you could be sitting there, like, beading, you could have some of your supplies there. You could have a video, you could have a photo book, anything so that they see that this is a real human being making and designing this.
I think that kind of stuff can really like help to draw people into your booth, but also help to open up those conversations. I know a lot of artists and makers can sometimes be introverts. I can definitely sort of like walk that line. If like I'm in person, I might not seem nearly as extroverted depending on the circumstance. But having worked in retail and doing craft shows, I found that if I was doing something at my booth, even if it was just like doodling and drawing, it still sort of has people have that subconscious connection that you're an artist and a maker. And it can kind of like start a conversation with them, which then helps to build that relationship, that customer service and sales relationship.
Yeah, I love that. And it can be hard. We're used to working alone, right? Like, and so then you're in this world where your senses are overloaded and you're supposed to talk to people and sell them your art, and you're showing your art, trying not to be insecure about it. And yeah, so having a way in to start that conversation is great.
Actually, that reminds me, I would say too, for some artists, so I, did craft shows for many years, and some artists like myself will be there, the one behind the booth selling their stuff. Sometimes you have a big show and you might need a helper. There's some artists who've actually found that it is better to just straight up hire a helper who is more of that extroverted customer service salesperson type. If you are really just too shy and do not want to interact with the people, if it's going to be energy draining for you, it might actually help to increase your sales to pay for somebody who really fits that role. And that's something that they're really good at to sell for you.
Absolutely. I think that's a fabulous tip. I think my passion about what I made fueled my extrovertness at shows, but there were definitely days where, my anxiety was getting in the way and I should have had somebody else come in and sell my stuff. At a bigger show too, I would have myself and then someone else in my booth, which definitely, I never had a time where that was not worth it, where it didn't increase the sales enough to at least, pay for that, what I was paying that person. And oftentimes that person would just want trade. So they would just want like credit for my, for the clothes that I made. So it worked out really well.
One other thing I think is important to consider is like, how can you increase your sales after the show too? Right? Like getting people's email addresses or their contact information, especially the people who are actually making purchases from you. Like if somebody has already purchased from you, they're much more likely to become a repeat customer than somebody who has never bought from you at all. So I know, Nicole, you're a big fan of email marketing, just like I am. Do you want to kind of talk about some of the things that you would recommend?
Absolutely. Collecting email addresses at shows, if you're not doing that, you are missing out on a huge, huge opportunity. I'm also a big fan of giving them something for signing up for your email address, like, having some type of an opt-in. So whether it's, sign up for my, email list and get 10% off, or get this free guide to, how to wear statement necklaces that I make, with any outfit, or whatever the case may be, or you're entered to win into a drawing to win blankety blank. And having multiple ways for them to sign up. So some people are going to want to write their name down on a pad of paper, and some people are going to want a QR code and they're going to want to do that. So just having those multiple ways and having it in multiple places too, like definitely your cash wrap while they're checking out, and then having an automated email to go to them after, after the show. It's like, hey, thank you so much for stopping by my booth, blah, 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 blah. It was so nice to meet you. I wanted to thank you for, joining my email list. And here's blankety blank, you know, or whatever the case may be. It can make a huge difference for sure.
Yeah, and I have a whole playlist here on YouTube about email marketing. So if you want to learn more about email marketing, you can check that out. Nicole, if people want to sign up for your email list or find out about Patchwork Shows, the series of shows that you run in California, or Craftcation Conference, an event that I love that is near and dear to my heart, where can they find you?
You can find me at dearhandmadelife.com. And yeah, you can basically get to all of my stuff from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole.